Good morning, Anthony. You're an author. You have children's books that appeal to adults and children, I believe. And you have many books, but you have one coming out right away.
Yes, I do.
The Miracle Book.
Yes, that's what its title is. That audacious title, The Miracle Book.
Really, what I want to talk about are all the things that you're doing and how that's going for you. So 30 Christian children's books for adults and children, including a travel guide to heaven and The Donkey That No One Could Ride. Now, I imagine those are two books that really resonated with people. Maybe we could talk about those just right at the beginning.
Sure. You said A Travel Guide to Heaven, correct?
Yes.
So Travel Guide to Heaven was my first book, published with Random House in 2003. So that's like 20-something, over 20 years ago. I'm not good
already.
How about that? Yeah. It had a lot of success. It was published in something like 18 or 19 different countries.
Oh, yeah.
Translated into a lot of different languages. At first, nobody wanted to publish it. You know, I have blocks of rejection notices from...
How many do you think? How many rejections?
It was close to 100. If you find the agents, and because, you know, you first try to go out and get an agent, and then you try to get a publisher, and nobody wanted it. It was too quirky. You know, A Travel Guide to Heaven. I got a lot of inquiries about it, but they were too nervous. They were too nervous about it. It sounded too odd. And I was about to just self-publish it because I knew it. I mean, I knew it was a good concept, you know, and I was going to self-publish it. But then I got a message on my an answering machine. In those days, we still had answering machines.
Yeah.
From an agent named Peter Miller, who's a good friend who has since died, unfortunately. But he just left a very simple message saying, "Hey, everybody wants to go to heaven. I'll represent you." You know, he cut through all of the bureaucratic publishing nonsense, acquisition committee nonsense that you have to deal with. He recognized right away that it was a good concept, and I tell you what, in a few weeks, I went from being totally rejected, right, to being like the girl who everybody wants to take to the prom. Now I had that feeling. I know how that girl feels because it was a bidding war. And all the different publishers.
Everybody just stepped up all of a sudden.
All of a sudden.
That's right. It's that first customer, isn't it? It's that first call.
Yeah. Everybody needs that kind of social, I don't know what the phrase is to describe it. Something that confirms that something is good. And then all of a sudden they see it's terrific. The point of that book, and that was not a very deep scholarly work, or at least it's disguised as a lighter book. It's disguised as a lighter book because I don't quote doctors of the church. I don't go into long passages. I just quote from the Bible. It's for all Christians. At that time, I'm Catholic. I'm a Catholic Christian, but at that time, and I still feel that it's very important to take the C.S. Lewis approach, that we have a common enemy, if you will, the secular society, and therefore, when you can write books that appeal to all Christians, it's better to do that if you can. And this particular book was speculations about what heaven might be like after the resurrection, not how to get to heaven. Now, if I was writing a book on how to get to heaven, then there'd be all kinds of theological distinctions, and I'd have to get into faith versus works and all those kinds of, theological battles. But because I was writing about what heaven might be like after the resurrection, that's something that all Christians can agree on. And the premise of the book was that heaven's going to have a physical component. After the resurrection, we're going to have glorified bodies. Christ, the risen Christ, is the first fruit. That's what the Bible says. So we're going to have some kind of glorified body of some kind. Not going to be the same. I mean, I hope it's not the same. I hope I don't have stuck with the same exact body in heaven as I have now. But it's going to be some kind of physicality. And therefore, if there's going to be a physical body, there's got to be some kind of physical environment. You know what I mean? And therefore, there's a lot of deductions that you can draw from that. Heaven will be colorful. It's not going to be less colorful than this world. If anything, it's going to be more colors. There are colors that we haven't been able to dream of that God can invent. It's not going to be, there's not going to be less life. There's going to be more life. It's not going to be less real. It's going to be more real. There's not going to be less activity and less love and less energy. There's going to be more of all those things, And so I drew that out chapter by chapter and try to paint a picture of what heaven might be like while keeping within the parameters of good theology. The book has an imprimatur from the Catholic Church, even though it's not a Catholic book, and I didn't advertise the imprimatur, but I went out and got the imprimatur only because I wanted to make sure that I was writing something that was free from doctrinal error.
I see. So is that an okay from above then, from higher?
An imprimatur is not an endorsement. What it is a theologian of the church in a specific diocese designated as for that role reads the book, and all he does, he carefully reads it and makes sure that it's free from doctrinal error.
Yeah.
In other words, if I said that heaven is going to be colorful and I get an imprimatur from the church, that doesn't mean that the church is saying heaven is going to be colorful. It means that the faithful can believe that heaven is going to be colorful, and they're still within the parameters of being a good Catholic, a good Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, in that book, I maintained that someday after the resurrection, there are going to be animals in heaven. There are going to be animals in heaven, and some theologians have said there's not going to be animals in heaven. Even Thomas Aquinas, revered great doctor of the church, perhaps the greatest genius who ever lived, perhaps. If you ask your friend Bishop Barron, he would probably say that. Even he didn't think there were going to be animals in heaven because, Christ didn't die for animals. Animals don't have a soul made in the image and likeness of God, et cetera, et cetera. There are arguments. But my argument, not to take issue with the great Thomas Aquinas, little Anthony DeStefano from Brooklyn, New York, far be it from me. But my argument was that, hey, look, God can do anything he wants. There's such a thing as gratuitous gifts. And we believe heaven one day after the resurrection is going to be lush with beautiful foliage and flowers. And, and I said in that book, do you really think that God is going to give life to some shrub and then deny life to a puppy? I mean, does that make sense? And so sometimes,
right.
So sometimes even the greatest theologians in the world are like the greatest scholars in the world today. They're great when it comes to the calculus of theology, but sometimes they get addition and subtraction wrong, And I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging. I'm not. And the point is that that's not a doctrine of the church, that there are animals in heaven. But you can be a Catholic and believe that animals are in heaven. There are plenty of things. One of the things that's so great about the Catholic Church, as I'm sure you're discovering, is we actually have the maximum amount of freedom. There's so much more that we can believe than an evangelical or Baptist. It's just that the lines are clearly drawn. It's like, okay, outside of this line, no, that's heresy. But within these parameters, you can believe whatever you like. I mean, within these. And so Travel Guide to Heaven was all about what heaven might be like based on the idea that there's going to be a physical component to heaven. It's not just what some people think, which is that, it's going to be airy and wispy and angels flying around with floating robes, and it's going to be gray and cloudy. My goodness. Of course, people are bored by the idea of heaven. Of course, they're not excited about going to heaven. They don't understand that if this life is real, heaven is not going to be less real than that. It's going to be more real. And it means, and I drew things out in that book very clearly as a writer. I said what that means is someday, after the resurrection, if you make it to heaven and your mother is there, it means that, and you haven't seen her in all these years, you're not going to be seeing a ghost. It means you're going to be able to go up to her and hug her, embrace her, feel the warmth of her skin, and hear her voice again, the voice that maybe you've been missing for so many years. That's the gift of heaven, that it's not just going to be spiritual. You know, there's we always have this leaning towards this Gnosticism, this over spiritualization, and you see that a lot in all religious people, Catholics too, and not just Protestants, where the body is bad and physical things are bad, and that's not the Catholic Church. We have in Christianity in general, we are an incarnational religion. We believe that God became one of us. He became flesh. And so it's got to be something good. And
right. It's got to be heaven reaching down to earth, but earth being receptive. And that's us.
And right. And earth being raised up. You know,
Yeah.
This is the point of the Eucharist. This is the point. God lowers himself to be like us. But why? So he can raise us up to be like him,
right,
that we can be more godlike and divine. So anyway, this book, it was written in a playful way. My idea was, look, heaven is the most enjoyable, fun, pleasurable, happy, joyful subject in the world. And I wanted to make sure that every single page of that book was joyful. I didn't want to make it boring. I didn't want to make it, I chose not to go after atheists in that book, you know, not really, as I have in subsequent books. I wanted every page to be pure and a delight, so that people who are afraid of, let's say, death, or people who have lost loved ones might be consoled and comforted by it. But some people have mistakenly think that because I chose to do those things, that it's kind of a light book, that it's not really a heavy book. But the point of the book was to impart a vision. You know, and once you give people a vision of something, they could have it forever. And in my mind, the scales have been too tilted towards the over spiritualized version of heaven. So maybe in my book, I tilted a little bit more towards the material view, but only because to me there needed to be a corrective. Anyway, to make a long story short, it was a pretty big success. Launched me on my career as an author, and 30. Now this is like my 30th book.
Right. Well, I think vision, like you said, without vision,
people perish.
It's material, and material isn't enough. It's only half the story. So yes, it doesn't take you to where you need to go to find all these benefits that you find with conversion. Like, it sounds to me like you're talking about many of the things that I experienced with my conversion, many virtues that opened my eyes, and then I could embrace. And it was a bit of heaven, right? Just a little bit of heaven, knowing that what might be in the future if I continue to strive in that direction.
Yeah, and isn't it funny? If you read the Gospels, you see Jesus Christ talking about the kingdom of heaven, and it's very strange because he talks about it as something in the future, but he also very strangely talks about it as a thing of the present. That kingdom of heaven is like this. It is like that. So it's got this this present day component. Its trajectory is in the future, but the idea is that heaven even now can break into this world. I mean, no matter how faith-filled you are, no matter how strong your faith and how strong you believe in your religion, we all know that this life of ours is always going to be a valley of tears and a place of sorrow to some extent.
Right.
But the gospel doesn't promise us joy. It promises us a peace that transcends all understanding. That's what's promised in the gospel. A peace that transcends all understanding, not a joy that transcends all understanding. But you can have those times of what heaven is going to be like, and you can feel those transcendent things in the good and the true and the beautiful, those transcendent things that we can experience, and we can get a taste of heaven, even here in this hard world we're living in.
Yes, that's right. It's worth the journey.
Yes.
And then the other book was The Donkey That No One Could Ride.
The Donkey.
Just tell me a little bit about that one.
I've always wanted to write children's books. That's for a number of reasons, not just because it's joyful and you get to work with an illustrator. So it's, writing a book could be lonely. You're by yourself all the time. Collaborating with an illustrator, especially when you're talking about beautiful paintings, color illustrations, is joyful. Also, nothing is more joyful than when a little kid comes up to you and tells you, you're their favorite author, so
Yeah.
it's something that is that little taste of heaven that you were speaking about. Also, though, not to go too much into this, hey, look, you got to be blind not to know that we're in the middle of a culture war. You know that very well.
Yeah.
And your husband knows that. And the front lines of that war are the children. The other side that's so blatantly anti-Christian, they have no problem jumping over the heads of parents to propagandize children with their secular anti-Christian message. So I've known from the beginning of my writing career that I wanted to write children's books just as an effort on the front lines of the culture war. Okay, the donkey that no one could ride is, we know that when Jesus rode into Jerusalem to save the world, to be crucified and to rise from the dead, he rode on a donkey that had never been ridden before. Mm-hmm. Now, we know the reason for that theologically. He rode on, he's a king, and instead of riding on a horse like other kings, he chose a beast of burden, like a donkey who carried a lot of weight, just like he was going to carry the weight of the sins on his shoulders. And he chose a donkey that had never been ridden because it was consecrated. Consecrated means set aside. Okay, mm-hmm. But how do you explain that to children? Mm-hmm. I in my little book, I wrote about this donkey that Jesus chose to ride, but I wrote of him as a donkey that no one could ride because he was weak and tiny and small, okay, and afraid and timid, and that's why nobody could ride him. And in this story, in the course of this story, the apostles drag this donkey away, and Jesus has like a little conversation with this donkey, asks him if he has faith. The donkey says yes, he believes, and Jesus turns him into a very strong, mighty kind of donkey, and he proceeds to ride into Jerusalem on this donkey that no one could ride. And of course, this is a story for adults too, because we're all weak, puny, fearful little donkeys. Yeah. And the power of faith, when you plug into the power source of the universe, you can overcome all of that, all of your fears. Mm-hmm. And so this was a book that not only resonated with adults, but because of the character of this poor little donkey, a lot of people told me that they shed some happy tears. And it was illustrated by a gentleman named Richard Cowdery, who's a New York Times best-selling artist. And so it sold a lot of books, and it's still, it was written in 2012. So now that's, but it's still selling every single Easter. It's out there. So sorry.
Who's your most favorite illustrator that you've worked with? I guess maybe that's not quite what I want to say. Who's illustrated most of your books?
Well, if most of them have been illustrated by this gentleman named Richard Cowdery. Okay. I use a different illustrator. I pick my illustrators based on the mission of the book.
I see.
Okay. So, and I make sure that because I've been successful, one of the perks of that is I got the clout to be the art director on all of my books. Mm-hmm. Very visual writer. So when I write my books, I have special illustrations in mind. And so Richard is someone who is fantastic at giving human expressions to animals. Because these books, we use animals. Why do you use animals instead of people? People have said to me, well, why don't you just write, about a person instead of an animal? And the reason is obviously because children find adults intimidating sometimes, but they don't find animals intimidating. And so they should find adults intimidating because adults are authority figures. But an animal allows them to enter into the story immediately without any fear, without being intimidated at all. And so you can get them involved much quicker if you have a cute little animal. And Richard Cowdery is just the best in the world at doing animals. And he could have been a Disney illustrator. He could have illustrated Bambi. That's how great he is. So I use him. But there are other books, for instance. Again, I have some specifically Catholic books. One of them that was a big bestseller was something called Our Lady's Wardrobe. And it's introducing children to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And the point of that book was to show children and adults that hey, Mary is real. She's not a fantasy. She's not a fictional character. She's not a fairy tale. She's not a figure of the imagination. She's real. In fact, the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary says that Mary in heaven right now has a glorified body in heaven. So I wanted this book to have a photorealistic feel. And because I wanted the realism of the images to reflect the the idea that Mary and the angels and the saints are real. They're not fake. They're not
Mm-hmm.
Santa Claus. And so I used someone who was specialized in photorealistic kind of artwork. So I picked the illustrator to match what the message of the book is.
That makes sense.
Most of my books, though, because they do involve animals, I like writing about animals because children love them so much. Most of the books do. Richard Cowdery has been my collaborator, and he's worked on a lot of secular mainstream books like, Marley and Me and Fiona the Hippo. He's had a lot of big bestsellers.
I know those. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to learning about your books and reading them to my kids.
Appreciate it.
My kids. Yay. I have kids.
That's right.
There's nothing better than having grandkids, kids and grandkids.
Yes.
That's been, as a grandmother, I've come to realize, and my sister and I talk about this, that grandchildren, grandma, that's number one. That's number one. There's nothing that comes before that relationship in your life. No matter what you do, that's your number one relationship. And I think that we have to, I would like to say that publicly more than once.
Well, it's a blessing for you. I don't have grandchildren. I have godchildren, and it's wonderful because you don't have to be, to be a mother and father is a hard job. You have to be strong. You have to exercise tough love the way God exercises with us, tough love.
Yeah.
But with a grandchild, with a godchild, you can indulge more in kindness, and it's more of a reciprocal kind of just plain old joy. So it's almost like a reward that you've got.
Yes,
You should take that reward. Why not? We've all suffered a lot. Take what we can get here. So it's nice to be able not to have to be the heavy, not to be giving. That's
for sure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's right. So I like to do my part as much as I can, but I know that I'm in the big scheme of family. I'm there to support. That's what I'm there for. And that's good. That's good.
By the way, I'll say one thing about this. I never knew my grandparents. They all died very young.
In Italy?
No, well, they were immigrants, and one of them died in 1955. Another one they all died young. In my family, we either live to we're 100 or we die in our 50s. So, it's one of the.
I think that's pretty common for people. I think that if you have something like a genetic problem of some sort, it gets you about 50. If you're fortunate and you don't have that kind of, your genes didn't show in that way, and you manage to sneak through, you get to be 100.
Yep. I'm hoping that I'm one of the ones that sneak through. But, I used to know Cardinal O'Connor a long time ago as the Archbishop of New York, Cardinal of New York. And I was blessed to have some meetings with him. And one of the things he always said was, Anthony, you always got to have your bags packed. Plan long range. But, the same God that gave you the morning doesn't promise you the evening. And you could be, and it doesn't matter how fit or healthy you are, you could still be hit by a bus or have
that's right.
Terrorism. So you got to have your bags packed. And
I agree with that. And you got to get done. And it sounds like you did, because you've written 30 books at least. So you have not put them off, I would say. It doesn't sound like you put them off.
I have, because, part of it, this is a blessing because so many people in the family have died young. And because so many have died older, and it's sort of like a crapshoot. I don't know which. That's given me a very healthy perspective. Maybe a little afraid, but I've always had a sense of the urgency of time, and that's a good thing. It makes you not only do more, but it also makes you enjoy more. I like to think I'm a joyful kind of a person, despite whatever suffering I've endured, and part of it has been because of this view I have that it all could end pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, I think I started writing a book of my own, and the first thing I wrote down really were all the things that I remember from my childhood that were mistakes or sufferings, time of misgivings and things like that. But then I went back through it again and wrote down all the interests I had, baseball and soccer and playing with everybody, volleyball, curling, all these things. And I realized, no matter what happened in my childhood, which I didn't think through before, I persevered. And I was like, that kind of puts the troubles that you have in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it in retrospect, of course, and this goes to a very deep theological point about suffering and the fact that why God allows it. You could spend multiple programs talking about that, but the bottom line is that God is able to pull good out of all suffering, and even the ones that are the most difficult. And people come up to me all the time, sometimes people who are angry, and they're like, well, how can you believe what you believe? My child died, or very hard. The words fail you at those points. Everything sounds so cliche. And the only thing that really helps is when you go back to the Gospels and you say, look at Jesus Christ. Look what God allowed to happen to his own son. What's the greatest evil that ever happened in the world? The greatest evil. The greatest evil was the crucifixion and the murder of Christ, because that wasn't just homicide. It wasn't just genocide even. It was deicide, the murder of God. I mean, what could be worse than the murder of God by his creatures? There could be nothing more obscenely ungrateful than that. So that's the worst thing that ever happened. But what happened 3 days later? What was God able to do somehow? He was able to pull out of the crucifixion, the resurrection. And the resurrection wasn't just one person rising. One person rising would have been terrific, like Lazarus. That's a very good thing.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't just one person rising. This was the reconciliation between God and man. This was raising humanity to a divine level. This was making it possible for us to receive graces in our life. This was throwing open the gates to heaven and allowing us to be there forever. So this wasn't just a good thing. This was the greatest thing of all time. So God was able to take the worst thing of all time and pull the greatest thing out of it. Now, if he could do that, then we just got to be able to trust that he could take all the bad things that happen in our lives, whether they are really horrible and traumatic, like the death of someone we love, to all the minor things, like being stuck in a traffic jam and being irritated, that he's able to pull good, a blessing out of that. And sometimes we know right away what the good is. Sometimes it takes a few years. Sometimes we won't know till we get to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I don't mean to go down that road, but
That's okay.
It's a very important subject that people need to hear about.
It is. And I wanted to also touch on, I've been just beginning to read, because it's very heavy, is the Treatise of Virtues by Thomas Aquinas.
Yes.
And it starts with happiness, and it's got a really good meditation about what happiness is and really how to go about having happiness. And he says, that is what people want. People want to say, no, you don't want happiness because happiness is fleeting and doesn't last very long and everything. But what is happiness and how do you attain it? He talks about that. And then he gets into all kinds of other things that have really slowed me down. But I really liked the way it began. I took a lot from that. So,
well, he's the greatest. And part of the reason why he's so great is because he is so dry. People complain about his dryness as opposed to St. Augustine, and they read the Confessions of St. Augustine or some other, or St. Francis de Sales, or some of these other writers that are passionate, and, they got to Thomas Aquinas and all of a sudden they're like, what the heck is this? It's so dry. But that's exactly why he's great, because it's just pure logic, pure rationality, pure common sense. And of course he really not only reconciled Aristotle with Christian. He didn't just baptize Aristotle, as they say, but he really did show that there can be no true contradiction between faith and reason. There can only be apparent contradictions. And that's his tremendous contribution to the world. So I'm glad that you're reading Thomas Aquinas, but good luck to you.
Yes, thank you. I'll need all the help I can get. So let's talk about this new book.
Okay.
The Miracle Book.
Okay.
And how you define a miracle. That's one of the chapters would be how to define a miracle, and also how to understand a miracle, I guess.
Sure. Well, the Miracle Book is a kind of I would say a practical nuts and bolts type guide to praying for a miracle, and the miracle could be any kind of miracle. It might have to do with your health or your finances or your family problems or just feelings of anxiety or hopelessness. I think many people out there are suffering, probably people listening to this podcast right now, they're suffering badly, and they don't know how to go about asking God for help other than begging him. You know what I mean? People beg, they plead, they negotiate, they promise they'll do absolutely anything if God will just give them this one thing. And then if God doesn't answer their prayer in the way they want, unfortunately, sometimes they lose faith, and they enter into a kind of a despair, and they get angry with God. And I thought for a long time, I thought there must be a better way. There must be a way of praying for a miracle that at least guarantees the best possible chance of God saying yes to us, or at least results in God answering us in a way that gives us some kind of peace that satisfies our soul. And I did quite a bunch of research on this. I read a lot of books on miracles. There are a lot of great books out there on miracles, including by C.S. Lewis. And I think that I did get some insights into this subject that could be very practical and helpful for people. I don't use any gimmicks here. No magic formulas that guarantee specific results. As I said, the book has an imprimatur for those people who are interested in that kind of a thing. But I think I offer solid, biblically based, theologically sound principles that can increase a person's chances of getting a miracle. And I guess the heart of the book, if I had to sum it up, is this: Jesus makes some pretty bold statements in the gospel, as you know, about prayer and miracles. He says things like, ask and you shall receive, and, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open to you, and, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you could move this mountain. And yet a lot of sincere, faithful Christians have experienced this pain of unanswered prayer. And this book takes that tension very seriously. And the central thesis, if I had to sum it up, is that to truly understand and apply these miracle promises of Jesus Christ, we need to have a deeper and a more paradoxical understanding of what Jesus was teaching. And at the heart of this book are what I call 7 miracle paradoxes, which show that effective prayer often requires holding 2 attitudes that seem to be in conflict, like healthy fear and courage, or precision and openness, persistence and decisiveness. That requires holding these kinds of pairs of ideas simultaneously. And the book culminates in a comprehensive miracle prayer that pulls all these different insights and paradoxes together, and offers a way, I think, to pray for the extraordinary with more confidence. As to your question about definition of miracle, well, this is really another paradox too. And I say in this book that, the whole book really hinges on a riddle. Do miracles happen every day, or are they as rare as winning the lottery? And again, it's like we hear this all the time. Miracles happen every day, but most of us, when we pray for a miracle, very few of us get one. You got a miracle. I know you got a miracle.
Well, I don't know. By your definition, I'm thinking, well, no, that probably wasn't a miracle, because there was possibly an explanation. It just happened on a day that I didn't expect it to happen, a day that I had said it would happen, but didn't expect it to happen.
But that doesn't mean it's not miraculous. And in the book, the answer is that both statements are true, as I say in this book. If you use a strict definition of a miracle, the strict definition, which is the supernatural intervention by God in the natural order of things, like the parting of the Red Sea, or the overnight disappearance of a malignant tumor without any treatment, then those kinds of miracles are very rare. But if you're talking about miracles in a more general way, which you could define broadly as an extraordinary answer to prayer that goes against, the laws of statistics, but unfolds through perfectly natural means, like, for instance, getting away from the health subject for a second, someone who doesn't have any money and they're about to lose their house, and they pray for a miracle, and suddenly this person receives the exact amount they need through an inheritance or some other kind of gift. Those kind of crazy, quote unquote, coincidences, they happen all the time, and they're from God. They're part of the divine plan. They're answers to prayer, but strictly speaking, they're not true miracles. So it's not really a riddle or a contradiction to say that miracles are rare but happen all the time. It just depends on the definition of miracle you're using, and my book discusses both types.
Okay. Yes, so I told you that my granddaughter was ill right now. And
Yes.
so we came back from Canada to be with her and her family. And it's funny because we left here 2 weeks ago, but my daughter had said, I think you should stay until mid-July. I think that it would, my idea of it and my understanding of this is that you're going to stay till mid-July, and that would be very good. And then we'll do the things we have to do in Canada. And we said, well, no, I think we're going to go home sooner than that. So we did go, got lots of things done. We didn't let that time go. We moved to 3 different places and organized houses. But then we came back, and here we are, and we're going to be here till mid-July. And I thought, isn't that funny that she knew weeks ago that this was what was going to happen, and here it is happening against all odds.
That again, but that's truly miraculous if you use the general definition of a miracle.
Yeah.
And that's why this book would probably be more accurately titled, how to get your prayers answered. You know what I mean? I mean, how to have effective, efficacious prayer.
Yeah. That's important.
They're miracles.
Also.
Yeah. But there are things that seem like miracles. And to us, they have the same effect as miracles. The whole point of miracles, as I discussed in this book, is to nudge us into turning around, into turning to God, toward God, away from the dark, to the light. And sometimes we're blind to the beauty of life. And so God is either forced to give us suffering or miracles or miraculous answers to prayer, so that we're jolted into seeing that life is more than just a collection of laws of the universe, but behind it all is a mind, a benevolent mind who loves us and has a plan for us. So he uses this answered prayer all the time to help us, and it's fair to say that that's miraculous.
Let's talk about the 7
miracle paradoxes.
7 miracle paradoxes. Yes. Let's see.
Sure.
Let's define. Well, let's go through those if you don't mind.
I don't mind, but okay. I think a paradox, first of all, it's important to understand. Paradoxes are truths that seem to contradict themselves on the surface, but they actually reveal a deeper kind of truth when you reflect on them. For instance, everybody knows the paradox: less is more, right? Or the only constant is change. Or the closer you look, the less you see. And on and on. And Christianity is filled with paradoxes. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. You must die to yourself in order to live. God is one, but God is three. Christ is fully God, but fully man. These aren't just poetic ideas. They reflect the reality that God is an infinite being, and that we're just finite creatures, and we can only understand bits of God's infinite truth a little bit at a time. And sometimes these bits of truth seem to contradict each other, but in reality, we just can't see the whole truth yet. It's too big for us to see. So by embracing paradoxes, we can sometimes come closer to appreciating the mystery and the wonder and the deeper truth of God. Now, how does that fit into miracles? Okay, as I said before, in the gospel, Christ, says some pretty amazing things about, having faith of a mustard seed and being able to move mountains. And yet sometimes we see that even the most faithful people don't receive what they pray for. What I suggest in this book is that these promises of Christ, while 100% true, aren't so straightforward as they seem. They involve paradoxes. They involve embracing pairs of truth that sometimes seem to contradict each other. And there are 7 of these that I speak of in this book. One of them is, the first one is spoken prayer, the prayer that we speak that comes out of our mouth versus the deep prayer of our soul. The second is the benefit of being afraid versus the need to have courage. The third is the need for persistent faith, versus the need for decisive faith. The gospel seems to require both. Then there's the need for self-reliance versus the need to surrender to God. And then there's the power of dying to yourself versus the power of living your best self.
Yeah.
Then there's the need to focus on our personal relationship with the Lord versus the need to be part of a community of believers. Again, the Gospels, the letters of St. Paul, they ask for both of these things. They seem to be at odds. And finally, there's the importance of precision in prayer versus the need for a radical openness to God's will. Those are the 7 seemingly contradictory propositions that I discuss in my book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to discuss any one of them with you.
Well, partly what I was thinking was, without, like you said, without fear, there wouldn't be a time where you thought, if only I had courage. Without fear, you wouldn't think that you need courage. And I never thought of that but it makes sense that's the mustard seed that developed into courage, that wanting to go forward, but having fear and seeing it as seeing obstacles everywhere, and then having the courage to find the path, no matter what, just to find the path forward. And that's something that people do all the time, I think.
It's very hard. Now, we were talking before our interview started about the folks over at EWTN. And, I don't know how much you know about the story of Mother Angelica, who's the founder of that network. Oh, she was a feisty nun. She yelled at me a couple of times, and it's frightening to be yelled at by a nun like Mother Angelica. Anyway, she was, I think she's a saint. But she once said that if God sends you tribulations, he wants you to tribulate. He sends you tribulations. He wants you to tribulate. In other words, we're not supposed to run from fear. We're supposed to go through it. And with God's help, we're supposed to come out on the other side stronger. And we all know that this is true. We all know, as you said, fear can help us to grow. It can help us to mature. It can protect us. It can focus us. It can make us sharper, keep us on our toes spiritually as well as emotionally and physically. It can prepare us. It can prune us. It can make us stronger. Most importantly, fear can make us more reliant on God. And dependence on God always equals intimacy with God. So fear can bring us closer to God. That's one of the reasons why Jesus was always talking about the dangers of wealth. Because when you're very, very rich, you have this illusion that you're self-sufficient, and that you don't need anybody, Then when something, when the doctor finds a spot on your lungs in an X-ray, all of a sudden all that illusory
material worth,
it all comes crumbling down, and you realize the truth of the matter, which is that we need God. We got to rely on God. Now, the paradox here is that what's always bad, and what the Bible really warns against, is anxiety. Anxiety is a chronic, heightened, extended sense of fear and worry about the future. And this often causes physical and spiritual paralysis that could prevent us from doing God's will. That's a very important distinction. Fear can be good because it can make us take action. It could drive us to our knees in prayer. But anxiety is paralyzing. It leads to hopelessness and doubt and despair and panic. St. Francis de Sales said that anxiety is like the cold that descends on in the forest and stops the trees from growing and causes the animals to hide. It brings winter to our souls. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is, while God allows and even desires that we tribulate when he sends us tribulations, he knows that it takes very little real terror to help us grow. He knows that there's a fine line between the benefit we could derive from fear and the paralysis that results from anxiety. So from the moment God allows us to experience fear, he also desires that we immediately pray for courage to combat anxiety. And sometimes this is difficult for people to do. They feel like they're stepping on the gas and the brakes at the same time. Because what you're supposed to do is, when you're afraid of something, your first reaction should be, God, I know you wouldn't give me this fear unless you meant it to help me in some way. So thank you. Thank you for giving me this fear. But I want to pray that this doesn't become anxiety, because I know that will stop me from doing the good. It will stop me from doing your will. So you got to have always that paradoxical attitude towards towards courage and fear.
So then spiritually, what do you think is anxiety then? Is that's fear over a long time with no investigation? Successful investigation, I guess?
We have to be careful because some people, especially in this day and age, are prone to anxiety for a lot of different reasons. But
I think it's from a lack of faith too, though. Anxiety. I wonder if that's true.
Well, I think in every Catholic Mass, you've been going to Catholic Mass for a little while, and you know that there's a part of the Mass where the priest, says, may God, free us from all distress, So it's part of the Mass. And the Catholic view is that after sin, the greatest evil in the world is anxiety. Not that it's a sin. It's not a sin. But it's an evil because it's paralyzing. It prevents us from doing the good. Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, the best thing to do is keep going, right? Keep going through the storm. That's what Winston Churchill said. Anxiety stops us right in the middle of the storm. We're not going through it anymore. We stop and we just stay there, and the whirlwinds surround us and spin around us. We never get out. It's a never-ending loop. So yes.
I like to talk about crisis. Crisis is bounded. Crisis doesn't last forever. The crises are bounded. So to realize that when you're in crisis, that it takes courage to persevere through the crisis the best you can, living moment by moment, really, making decisions moment by moment to stay present, really, so you can see what to do next, but that it will end because, like you said, the only constant is change. It's going to change.
Yes, and we're taught also by Christianity that God will only give us what we can handle, Some people make fun of that, but it's true. He won't test you beyond your limits. And sometimes, if we could see the future, we would know that if we just held out a little bit longer, the storm would end. And in its worst form, you have suicides. And it's said, I don't know the exact statistics on this, but I know that usually there's a 3-hour window when you're going through intense suicidal thoughts. And it's so important at those moments to call that suicide hotline because they'll keep you on the phone. And if you make it past that 3-hour period, things will abate enough to where you won't kill yourself. In most cases, the same thing is true for sin. People who are tempted to sin sometimes think, I cannot overcome this compulsion. And sometimes it is a compulsion. It's an addiction. It's very, very, very bad. And it takes a long time to overcome these things. But yes, if you do have faith and you're trying to lead a good Christian life, if you do hold out sometimes just a little bit longer, it will abate whatever that compulsion is. So yes, you're absolutely right that there are parameters around this. But what the devil does is saying the devil fishes in troubled waters. When you're anxious, you're giving the devil you're giving him maximum space to operate. He knows what anxiety does to us, and that's when he tempts us most. And one of the temptations is to plant the thought in our mind that no, this is never going to end. This is the way it's going to be forever. You're never going to you're going to be tempted tomorrow morning the same way as you're tempted now. Your life is never going to get better. There's no hope, despair. That's the devil's temptation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I've seen that in my friends.
Yes.
Seen that in my loved ones.
Me too.
I've been fortunate that anxiety wasn't something that it's not been one of my challenges. But I have learned to accept daily the challenges that come my way. And I know that they're going to come, and I can also think that there are going to be challenges today, and I can be grateful for them because they are inevitable, and I have lessons to learn.
So one time I was going through one of these anxious periods. I won't go, over what it was. I've been through, like everybody else. Health problems in my family, financial problems, you name it, like every human being who's attained a certain age. And somebody gave me advice one time about this, and it was, look, you got to get up in the morning, and you got to get into the passenger seat of the car, and God is the driver, and you have to say to him, okay, God, where are we going today? Where are we going today? What do you got planned for me today? What kind of adventure do we have? What kind of aggravating things, tough things we got planned? If you have that attitude at the beginning, not that you become that you give up your right to do things. That's opposite. That's one of the paradoxes. One of the paradoxes I discussed in this book is the need to be self-reliant while surrendering. And we can talk about that because that's important. Mm-hmm. But if you have that attitude when you get up in the morning, you know, like God is in charge, and whatever you're going to throw at me, God, I'm ready. That's a healthier attitude to have. And you won't get so upset when all your plans are screwed up, as they invariably will be.
Yes, that's right. Okay, let's talk about what you just mentioned. Now I can't remember what it is already.
Self-reliance. Yes, versus surrender. Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Because I was very self-reliant before my conversion. That was my guiding principle. Yes. Was self-reliance. It got me a long way until it didn't get me anywhere at all.
Yeah. It's tough. On the one hand, you are expected to act. You got to go to the doctor when you're sick. You got to call a lawyer when you're in legal trouble. You got to fight injustice whenever you see it. You have to use all your talents to solve your problems. You can't just sit back and do nothing. You have to fulfill your obligations in life. You can't be completely passive and expect God to do all the work, because He's not going to do it. He
sends you on mission. You know,
and He equips you with gifts and talents.
And they're challenging.
Purposely
it's not easy.
You can build yourself up, expand your soul, so that when you go to heaven, you'll be able to hold more joy. The whole of life is God is like a coach, making us grow. Why grow? So that when we get to heaven, our souls will be bigger than they would normally have been and could hold more joy. Saint Therese of Lisieux, you know, she, one time when she was a little girl, she asked her sister who was a nun, she said, how could everybody in heaven be completely happy? You know, are the great saints not, you know, more happy than the little saints, than the people who get through to heaven, probably like I will, by the skin of my teeth? You know, how can we all be equally happy? And her sister said, no, that's not the way it is. And she showed Saint Therese 3 glasses, a little small a thimble, and a medium-sized glass, and then some big vase or vase. And she filled them all up with water. And she said, are these all full? And Therese said, yes, they're all full. Well, that's what happens to us in heaven. We are filled up. We're as happy as we can be based on our capacity. And some people go to heaven and they have the capacity of a thimble. Somebody like me, probably. Then there are other people, the great saints, who have these capacities of these tremendous, glasses. So one of the things God is trying to do on this earth to us is like be a glass blower, you know, and blowing us out so that we can be bigger. And that's what some of the points of the suffering, all the suffering is. Mm-hmm. But getting back to the paradox. Mm-hmm. So you can't sit back and do nothing. But at the same time, and this is where you and other people and me have especially people who like to be in control, like I do, after you do everything you can do, that's when you have to let go. You have to relinquish. You have to trust that whatever the outcome you're working for and you're praying for, it's ultimately in God's hands. And you have to try to be at peace, even if you're afraid, even if your emotions are trembling, that things might not turn out for you the way you like. In other words, you have to say what Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane, not my will, but your will be done. So it's not an either or situation. You're sort of like a sailor who trims the sails of his boat while letting the wind do all the work. We're called to act boldly while at the same time resting in the Lord. So again, you have to be self-reliant. You have to use every gift and resource God has given you, but you can't make the mistake of thinking you're in ultimate control. You always have to subordinate your will to God. As St. Augustine said, great thing to remember. Pray as though everything depended on God. Work as though everything depended on you. That's the balance we're trying to achieve in the Christian life. And that's the if I may say so, the sweet spot when it comes to obtaining miracles.
Okay. Right. We have to do our part, and we have to also let go of outcomes. Really. right? We don't know how it's going to end. Only God knows how it's going to end.
Right. And that ties into the maybe the most important paradox of the book, which is that we have to be specific in our prayers, but at the same time we have to be completely open to the way God wants to answer us. And people, again, because of the way people are built, because of the way they grow up, you sometimes we're predisposed to acting in a certain way, or highlighting this element in the gospel, or that teaching, or this teaching. The Catholic approach is, we have to do both. We have to do everything. So some people say, oh, we don't have to be specific in our prayers because God already knows what we want. So all you do is say, God, help me. But there's a real value in being specific in our prayers. Precision in prayer shows God that we trust him with the intimate details of our lives, just as we would a close friend. And if the goal as a Christian is to have a personal relationship with the Lord, you have to share those kinds of details. That's what relationship is all about, sharing, So when we make specific requests, we're acknowledging that, God isn't just Lord of the church we belong to. He's the Lord of our families. He's the Lord of our finances. He's the Lord of our vacations. He's the Lord of our bedrooms, Also, when we're precise in prayer, we're acknowledging the fact that God doesn't just view our lives from a distance, like that old song says, but he's right here with us right now, deeply involved, cares about everything we care about. But at the same time, and this is where the paradox comes in, while we're being precise, we simultaneously have to be open to God's will. And the reason is we don't always know what's truly best for us. Even when we're praying with great sincerity. In fact, many times we really don't even know what we want. Our desires may seem real to us, but they're always wrapped up in our emotions. They're always influenced by fear and desire and pride and pain and ambition. So openness to God's will shows that we trust God because he can see the big picture. He can see the future. He wants what's best for us, not just in the moment, but forever. And so when you embrace this paradox by being precise, but radically open to God's providence, I think that's when all the channels of grace-filled divine possibility are opened up to you because of your willingness to give God the maximum amount of faith and surrender.
Yes, I think when we're trying to control or fix a situation and we stop and pause and say, okay, I admit I don't know what to do here. Or whatever I'm doing isn't working. So there's got to be another way. I'm open to it. And then or sometimes I've got something I need to say to someone that is going to fix their life, and I'm certain of it, but now isn't the time. Oh, okay. So I park that thought and think, well, maybe there'll be another time to say this. And then sometimes it never comes because it wasn't the right thing to say. Or sometimes it comes and I didn't even plan it. It just comes and I've said it and I think, oh, that's when it was supposed to be said. And it has nothing to do with my plan. And I think, okay, thank you.
I resonate with what you're saying so well. And pride plays such a part in everything we do. And this has happened to me a lot. I'll say to myself, okay, I'm going to go into this situation here, and I'm the expert. I'm the guy who wrote all these books. And obviously these people, they don't maybe know as much as me. And so what am I going to say to them? What am I going to say when they ask this question or that question? And I'm thinking about it. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should just shut my mouth and not say anything. I'm thinking all these things revolving around how I'm going to help these people. And then I go into the situation and unbeknownst to me, they do something that helps me. They're the ones that say something that helps me. They open my eyes and I'm like, you stupid jerk. There you go again. You think you're letting everything revolve around you. And meanwhile, God put you in this position, not so you can help them, but so they can help you, dummy. And that happened. God does that to me all the time, Tammy, to show me, to
show you where you stand. Yeah.
To humble me. Yes.
Yeah. Right. And humble, that's kind of where we start. That's where we start our communication from, real communication from.
That's right. And it's on humility, not false humility. True humility is not to say that you don't have a gift if you have a gift. That's false humility. And and false humility is an evil because it's not true. God is truth. So if you're a great painter or you're a great writer or you're a great speaker, you don't have to ever say to other people, "Oh no, I'm really not that good." You just, it's true that in the spiritual life, one of the big Catholic expressions is, the spiritual life is about three things: humility, humility, and humility. I forget what saint said that, but all humility is, it's the truth. It's that compared to God, to the awesomeness of God, you are infinitesimal. No matter how great you think you are, you're really nothing compared to God. And everything you have, all your gifts, are just gratuitous gifts. So humility is the starting point because it's the truth.
Yeah. And it's really a relief if you admit it. If you admit that that's true, you think, oh, wow, that takes a lot off my shoulders, and that's better.
Yeah, when you have Vince Lombardi, the great football coach, said that. He said that exact thing. He said, if you really relinquish, then it removes that burden from you, because insofar as your part in the endeavor, whatever that endeavor is comparatively small. God is the one who's doing the lifting, the heavy lifting. He's the one who's fighting the battle, and he said this is a God gentleman who has up till now never lost any battle that he's been in. So it takes away that burden from you because you are relying on the one who made the universe.
Yes. So what kind of so you've been writing these books for children, which means you're writing them for families, which means you're writing them for mothers and fathers.
Yes.
Right. Essentially.
Always. People ask me that all the time. You write children's books. I'm like, well, sort of. I'm very aware that if a child likes a book, first of all, children don't always read these books themselves. Their parents read them the book. Their uncles and aunts read them the book. Their older siblings read the book. Their grandparents, their godparents read them the book. And if a book is really good, if the kid likes the book, sometimes he makes those adults read the book, not one time or two times. Sometimes he'll make or she'll make them to read the book 20 times.
Oh, yeah, or 100 times.
Yeah, and I've got this. So to me, I've got this tremendous captive audience of adults that have to read these books. So of course, I want them to be not only entertaining for adults, but I want them to have layers of meaning, so that the adults can be reminded of truths themselves. And if they could, sometimes, if the story is good enough, if they can have a poignant experience. The model that I use, again, not to brag or something, but you got to model yourself after somebody, is Jesus Christ. His parables, one of the things that drew me to the faith are those parables that a simple person can understand on the street. Fishermen and humble workers and farmers, they could understand these parables. And yet the greatest theologians of all time, like Thomas Aquinas, can write, treatises on that. People like your husband find, these layers and layers and layers of meaning in these parables. And I thought to myself at the beginning of my writing career, if that could be my goal, to write a children's story that as an entertainment is perfectly good on its own, but has several layers of meaning, both for the child and for the adult too. That's the goal. That's the objective. That's what I'm trying to achieve in children's literature. Now, whether I achieve it or not, probably not. But that's what I'm shooting for anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think movies. My son, when he was a baby, he watched Walt Disney's Fantasia many, 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 many times. Many, many times. And I thought, isn't that interesting? And he's a musician.
Yes.
And he sings. So that was an influential. He was watching a mastery of music and visual interpretation of it, and he needed that. He just needed it. It's something, again, this ties into deeper things. I try to rhyme most of my children's books when I can. Oh, that's good to hear, because that's so much easier to read when you're reading it to a child.
and there are people out there that are bad rhymers, and so I don't advise everybody. Rhyming is tough because it's not just the rhyme itself, the sound of the word. There's the meter, there's where the feet fall, there's the syllables, there's the accents, and all of that stuff. A lot of times you see bad rhymes, but if it's a good rhyming book, then yes, it's easy to remember. But it's more than that. It goes much deeper than that. It goes back to some of the old teaching about the music of the spheres. It's a very, very deep thing, and it's very theological. God creates us. So we come from God, we live here, and at the end we go back to God. So there's this elliptical kind of a movement. And we see that right across the solar systems with the galaxies, and we see it right here in life, in the seasons of the year. This elliptical going and coming back to things familiar. And we see it on a subatomic level with the nucleus and protons and electrons. It's wired into our system, this coming and going to the same source. And a good rhyme accomplishes that. It starts with the same sound at the beginning. It goes somewhere, and then at the end it comes back to the same kind of a sound. And that's why it's so memorable. And that's why it's like music. And that's why if I'm able to take a children's book and I'm able to create good rhymes, it's almost like I'm scoring the children's book. I'm putting music to it, And so then now you have a product in this little children's book that not only has a story, but it also has pictures that are powerful. And it also has a kind of a music because of the rhymes. And you're getting that kind of experience of that Fantasia that Disney was able to give. If you do it right, it could be a life-changing, vision-changing, paradigm-shifting kind of experience.
Yes, there's nothing better than being able to really ham up the voices in the book in a musical way when you're reading to a child. It's because they're so. I can tell my little grandson is just about. I guess he's 5. He just turned 5. And you start to read and you can see that he's completely got it in his mind's eye. And he's there with it. And he even sometimes acts it out. He acts it out because he's there so directly. And it really helps if the author has made it, has made the words and the story come alive in its rhythm.
Yes. The G.K. Chesterton said that there's a line that goes from the eye and the ear directly to the heart that bypasses the brain. It goes from the eye to the heart, bypasses the brain. And if you give a child a piece of music or a piece of for the ear or some writing for images to visualize, he can feel it emotionally without even understanding it, without having to analyze it. He just, boom, it hits him. And another line from C.S. Lewis, that the point of these children's books is to baptize a child's imagination. I love that. That when I heard that from C.S. Lewis, I said, of course I want to write children's books. You're baptizing a child's imagination. You're showing them that the imagination can be used for to spread the gospel and a force of good in a person's life.
Yes, and that's why a very sophisticated Christian story is a good story. It's a very good story because it has this transcendent meta story that's weaved into it, and as Jordan would say, a meta story.
Yes.
And that's, there's nothing better than that.
I don't think so.
It's an infrastructure. It's an infrastructure that we depend on.
Yes. Yeah, I'm hopeful that I've approximated that, or I've tried for that. I don't want to give the impression to any of your viewers that I think that I've accomplished this, because I don't. I hope that I think I've written 20 children's books and maybe 6 or 7 books, 18, 19 children's books, 7 books for adults, and then 4 or 5 gift books, they're called. I'm hoping that, in one of those 30 books, in one of the 20 children's books, I've approximated something like we're speaking about. But I have no idea whether I
Well,
have
that's
it.
what you aspire to, I imagine.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what we all aspire to, is doing
yes.
something like that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I hope I haven't spoken too much.
No, that was great.
No.
So your book is out, but it's not on Amazon quite yet, so it will be.
It should.
But
It
by the
should be.
time this
They
comes
finally
out,
got. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. They will have had it by then, I think.
yeah, and we can have it out sooner than later on your schedule. Okay, so just tell us what you need.
I think we should have this out as soon as possible because
Okay.
you can get this book through the publisher. You can get it
Yeah.
through Barnes and Noble. You can get it lots of other places beside. And I always encourage people to go to their Christian and Catholic bookstores
Yeah.
and patronize those. So you don't have to
Yes.
get this through Amazon.
Yeah, I agree. And Amazon tries to sell you so many things now before you hit buy that I think that Amazon's days are numbered. It just used to be so simple. You would go in just like into a store and you'd say, "This is the book I want. Thank you very much. Here's the exchange of money." And now it's like, "Well, do you want a banana? Or would you like a Coke?" Or
Constant upselling. It's so weird. Constant upselling.
what's
It's
the
like,
sign of the end of the company
yeah.
as
Well,
it is. So we might as well get used to shopping
okay.
again, going out with our car or walking down the street.
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and it was a lot easier. Now I live in New Jersey, and I got to get in the car. But back in the day, it was nice to have all those convenient things right there on the block.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a town of 2,000 people, so I could walk. But it was so cold that in the winter, it was almost taking your life in your hands to walk the 10 minutes down because I lived so far north.
Oh my gosh!
So,
No.
yeah.
We had cold winters in New York, but not like that.
Yeah. Well, I was in northern Alberta, and if you came across Canada,
Oh
it
my
would
God.
be into Labrador. So it
Yeah.
was very far north.
Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like, what were my mom and dad thinking?
I don't know. I'd like to go there someday to a place like that, though, to Labrador, and just write a book. That that
Oh,
idea
yeah.
of
Yeah. Or
the
Newfoundland.
Yeah,
Yes.
and just
Jordan
go.
and I went to Newfoundland with Rex Murphy, who was one of our best journalists in all of Canada and all of time. He just passed away last year, and he was a Newfie. And he took us to Newfoundland. Jordan has a documentary made with him, and he was a poet. He was a poet, and everything he said was poetic because he studied poetry so much.
Yes,
going along with what we're talking about.
I wish
it was easy to listen to him.
I wish I was that way. I really do. But, God did not give me that. I don't speak, in paragraphs that come flowingly out of my mouth. And then I have this nasal New York accent. I could never be a great communicator like you and your husband because I just, I'm a writer. I got to stick to what I do. I do media because I have to, but I don't like to generally subject people to my voice. I'm being honest. I'm being vulnerable.